Australia is the sixth largest country on Earth. The landmass is so massive you could comfortably fit two Indias inside its borders. Yet 90% of the Australian population is squeezed into just 0.22% of the continent. That tiny fraction of livable space is almost entirely restricted to the outer coastal fringes, concentrated in exactly 5 cities: Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, and Melbourne. Look past those coastal edges and you find a near-absolute demographic void. To explain this emptiness, early British colonizers promoted the legal doctrine of Terra Nullius, nobody's land. They sold the world a myth that this massive continent was naturally desolate, unowned, and passively waiting for European civilization. This massive landscape was actively and violently emptied of its original inhabitants. Only after the interior was cleared did the new settlers realize the geography itself was too hostile to conquer. Australia's vast empty space is the direct result of a dark imperial history, crashing headfirst into an unforgiving planetary environment. On January 26, 1788, British ships arrived at Botany Bay. Their immediate goal was to establish a remote penal colony built on convict labor, immediately rewriting the rules of land ownership on the continent. The arrival triggered a biological catastrophe. Introduced diseases like smallpox, for which the native population had zero immunity, wiped out 50% of the people in the Sydney and Port Phillip regions almost overnight. These outbreaks were allowed to run their course, effectively decimating the local population before the first inland expeditions even began. Following the biological devastation came physical displacement. Indigenous groups were locked out of their resources by modern land fencing. Those captured were subjected to horrific forced labor practices, including pregnant native women being forced out to sea to deep dive for pearls. This chart tracks the demographic collapse during the 100-year frontier war. Through systematic violence and displacement, the indigenous population plummeted from roughly 750,000 down to a mere 30,000 individuals. A century of engineered disease, forced labor, and targeted warfare cleared the continent of its original inhabitants, manufacturing a massive, artificial demographic void. Entering the 20th century, the British Empire drafted the remaining male population to fight in World War I and World War II. In the First World War alone, 1 out of every 5 men was sent to Europe, and 40% of them never returned. At the same time, the government implemented the Immigration Restriction Act of 1901, widely known as the White Australia Policy. By outright banning non-white immigrants, they legally blocked the specific demographic streams that could have repopulated the territory. Heavy global war casualties, combined with strict racial isolation laws, locked the population numbers in place. By the mid-20th century, there simply weren't enough people left to scale up and settle the interior. Today, Australia has rebounded to 26 million residents. So why are they still trapped on the edge of the map? Because the continent possesses 3 intense, natural defense mechanisms that physically bar human expansion. The first barrier is the Western Plateau. Cold Antarctic currents chill the ocean off the southern coast. Because the water is cold, evaporation is extremely low, meaning rain clouds fail to form and move inland over the plateau. Stripped of consistent rainfall, the ancient bedrock here contains extreme levels of natural salt. As these rocks weather down, they poison the groundwater, leaving the soil completely toxic for agriculture. The final barrier is the Eastern Highlands. The Earth's rotation drives trade winds that push warm, moisture-heavy Pacific water against the east coast. But the massive Great Dividing Range acts as a physical wall, trapping those storm clouds directly over the shoreline. Because the weather is trapped against the coast, those concentrated populations are hammered by cyclical, devastating floods and multiple severe cyclones every single year. Even if millions of people attempted to migrate inward today, the geological and atmospheric math of the continent is explicitly designed to repel them. Today, native Aboriginals account for only 3.8% of Australia's population, barely a million people. That is fewer individuals than you will find in a single average-sized Indian town. This graphic shows the demographic reality: a deeply fractured native population on one side and a modern population on the other, permanently trapped on the extreme fringes of the map, under constant siege by the climate. The vast emptiness of the Australian map stands as a haunting monument to history. The continent was not discovered empty. Human imperialism violently cleared the land, only to be defeated by extreme planetary geography.